I'd start off with that by went for a bicycle ride with a friend on Sunday. It was just such a beautiful day, and visited a number of parks along the way, just sort of cruising along. But it was really fun to visit Mount Tabor and just sort of cruise up over the top and just see how many people were out enjoying the lovely fall weather. Lots of families, just people enjoying the views into the city. So that felt really good to me. It was just like, okay, everybody's charging up their solar cells, one of the last sunny days that we're going to have for a while. Patty, how about you? What's the most recent park that's out of your routine that you visited?
I haven't ventured beyond my little back garden, I'm afraid.
Okay. Adina, how about you?
Well, this past Friday, I joined Ross Swanson and Tanya Booker and a bunch of other parkies to have a tour of Gateway Green. And we were there with the contractors as well. So I was there before they started work and now as they're finishing it. So I really didn't see much in between, but it's pretty spectacular looking. And I think we're looking to open that around Thanksgiving. So it's going to be a great amenity for that area of town, and just so bizarrely unique. This little bike park that's just tucked in between two freeways. So it was pretty exciting, and it was great to get out and see staff out in the parks.
That sounds great. Randy, if you're not in the middle of breakfast, can you update us on your recent out of routine park visit?
Sure. Inspired by my board chair, Jules Bailey, did a little interview with him to kick off our fall fundraising campaign. But anyway, one of the questions we asked him, I'm sort of giving it away, but is, if you could be a park, which one would you be? And he said, Piccolo Park. And so happened that I was going over to see a friend. So I thought, I used to live in that neighborhood. It's kind of 27th and Clinton, between Clinton and Division. I'm going to go visit that park just to see it. And for those of you who don't know the history, the space between Division and Clinton was actually going to be the Mount Hood Freeway. And ODOT condemned quite a lot of properties along there. And actually, when I moved into the neighborhood in 1990, there were still a lot of empty lots from that time. And of course, the freeway got killed, but one of these little remnant lots that once had a little worker's house on it became Piccolo Park. So it's this, lovely little just neighborhood pocket park.
Great, Randy, thank you. Vicente, how about for you?
That's a great question. A couple parks I'll mention, Lesser or Lesser Park. I don't know how to pronounce the correct pronunciation. Somebody help me with that. Is it Lesser?
Lesser.
Lesser? Okay.
Yes.
So Lesser Park, I actually have searched for that park as a ranger and couldn't quite find it because I always got called to another park. So I was just happened to be driving and saw it. So now that I know where it is, it's on my radar screen to get back and actually go into the park. So Lesser Park is the one I'm going to get to. But this weekend, I actually pulled over and had a little conference call at Lewitview Park. And I mean, everybody loves Lewitview, and it was pouring down rain, and there was a unpermitted birthday happening under the covered area. But it was amazing because even in the pouring rain, families are finding ways to use our amenities. And it was good to see that despite the rain, people are out there still using and accessing the park. So yeah, those are the two I'll mention.
Great, thank you very much. And Tanya, how about for you?
So I, outside of my routine, definitely Gateway Green, as Dina mentioned, and that's going to be amazing. The other one that's outside of my routine that might be shocking to folks is Forest Park, but I was at Forest Park on Friday as well. My time in Portland, I've lived in North Portland Northeast Portland and Southeast Portland. So Forest Park's a little bit out of my path. So it was great to get up there and see some of the work we're doing and look at some exciting ideas for the future.
Sounds great. Tim, how about for you?
Hey everybody, I made it up to McCoy Park recently up in New Columbia. So I used to work for Home Forward, the housing authority who developed that community, and it was just really nice. I love that park, love how it brings the community together, and was really happy to see a Multnomah County ballot box in the park. So making sure that folks over there have an easy opportunity to vote.
Cool. David, how about for you?
I, like Patty, haven't gotten out of my routine very much, but on Sunday when it was so beautiful, I did take advantage of Terwilliger Parkway and Council Crest on my bicycle. So
Nice.
Always a beautiful view up there when it's sunny and clear.
Yes, indeed. Aaron, how about for you?
Yeah, we actually went, I think last week to go visit the new playground at Creston Park. So that was fun. It's a great playground.
Excellent. Mike, how about for you?
Yeah, sure. About a week or two ago, my wife Debbie and I went to Oak Spot and did a lap around Oak Spot, 2 hours, and did something and had it was a beautiful day. It was just a great experience.
Nice. Claudio, how about for you?
So this was actually a couple of weeks ago, but my mom was in town, and it was the first time she'd seen her grandkids in, almost a year. And we went for sort of a hike walk, at Mount Tabor, which I don't get to nearly enough. And when we got to the top, my daughter gave my mom a little bit of a lesson in the racism and sexism of Harvey Scott, who was still standing at the time. This was on Monday. I took the Monday off. And the following day, he came down. And I'm pretty sure she didn't have anything to do with it, though.
All right, thanks for that clarification. Ian, what about you?
Hi, Paul. Like Patty, I have been cooped up lately, but I did manage to visit virtually the world's smallest park. Used to, in a former life, work for the Trailblazers, and one of my former colleagues unveiled the new Trailblazer court design there at Mill Ends Park, which I thought was really cool to see the Trailblazers still continuing to use Portland Park and use Portland Parks and play with Portland Parks and be part of Portland Parks. So that was great to see. In the pandemic, they're still doing good stuff, and that Portland Parks has always been a good partner for them. So that's been the extent of my parks experience. I'm both happy and sad to say.
All right, thanks for sharing. Todd, how about for you?
Similar to Tanya, got up to Forest Park and Northwest Thurman Trailhead. I don't think I had ever actually been there before, or maybe I had, but it's been a long time. And I'd heard about the traffic congestion and the parking limitations there. So I took a look at that, checked that out today, or this week, past week. Yeah, it's good.
Thank you. Jamie, how about for you?
One of the parks that means the most to me, I was fortunate enough to get to work with a small group of folks that worked at the Rice School for the few years we had staff sited there, and Rose City Park became an extension of our work team, and we often set up tables outside in the park and did a lot of our work meetings outside, and it was really lovely to have that access and space with the playground, and we could walk loops around the golf course, and really enjoyed that time so close to that space.
Thank you. Casey, what can you share in terms of a new park experience for yourself?
I was going to my business address, which is actually a post office box on the west side of town. And I was driving by Gabriel Park, and the trees on the west side of the park were stunning. So I ended up parking there and taking a look. And all the trees of the park are stunning, but the west side particularly, just the density of them and how they're changing is just beautiful.
Very nice. Alejandro.
Yeah, I had the chance of going to Cali Park a couple of weeks ago, and other than the amazing playground, which is key for my visits, and the very unique layout, it was very refreshing to see the diversity there. I feel like I've heard at least 4 different languages being spoken in the playground at least, and there was a couple of unauthorized birthday parties as well with different music and people dancing. So it was like a very unique experience.
Thank you. And Bonnie.
Well, I don't get out of my regular routine very often. I'm suffering from the David Patty syndrome, I guess. But I was thinking about recently, so the only social activity I've been doing lately has been, walking with friends. And so we try and find a park between us usually to meet in. And one particular friend suggested Alberta Park, which is not one of my regular parks. So I did enjoy a few laps through there a couple weeks ago. So that was a nice park.
Yeah. Alejandra.
Hi, everyone. I haven't been able to venture out to the Portland area too much lately. I live in Crook County, Washington. But pretty recently I was able to visit out in Broughton Beach. It's a beautiful space and connect with community out there.
Thank you. Tamara.
I also haven't been out a whole lot. It's actually very cold in my house, so I might grab a blanket here soon. I did visit Mount St. Helens, which is not a Portland park, but it was fun to go and do field work for the first time in a while.
That sounds great. Jenny.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I actually added a new park to my routine recently. I've been meeting a friend at Columbia Park on Sundays, and we run and walk the trail there a few times, and the trees are just so gorgeous right now. It's awesome.
Thank you. And last but not least, Katie, unless someone else has joined us.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Well, I grew up around Mount Tabor, but I recently got a tour and of Mount Tabor's reservoirs, but the history of the reservoirs. So there's soon going to be signage up there and through the water barrel, and it's just really interesting. So yeah, so that's the most recent. And my good old Cherry Park, where I walk my dog and sometimes see coyotes and identify trees. So thank you.
Oh, you bet. And I spoke to you soon. I hadn't scrolled over far enough. So we've got Jen and Tamara and Kenya at least. So Jen.
Good morning. I got to go to Cathedral Park to put in kayaking on a Sunday morning recently. And it was chilly but sunny and lovely. And by the way, those colorful trees on the west side of Gabriel Park are Oregon ashes and a couple of Norway maples and a red maple or two. So a lot of yellows and reds.
Thanks for that update. Tamara.
I normally go to Louisville View, which is my home park, and I enjoyed it in any time of the year. So I seldom go to some other parks, but this one really has my heart because I enjoy the views. Whichever way you go, you have a wonderful view either of Mount St. Helens or Mount Hood, or a wonderful skyline of trees. So that's my favorite.
Thank you. And then Kenya.
I actually have not had a recent new park experience.
Good honesty. Anything else you want to add to that?
I'm surrounded by parks, so and I go to a lot of parks, so I haven't found that new experience yet.
Okay, well, it's waiting for you out there somewhere. Thank you. How about Nicola.
Hi, I spend time in parks every day around my neighborhood, Wellington Park and Rose City Park, and I can't remember the name of the park that's next to the golf course down over the hill, but that park. But I haven't been to any new parks recently.
Okay. And Lauren.
Morning, everyone. I spent last Sunday at Leeds Botanic Gardens because they're hiring a new executive director. So I participated in the interviews. So that was fun.
Bet it was. That sounds good. All right. And then Margaret.
Good morning. So I recently moved to Vancouver. So my new parks have actually been in Southwest Washington. I've been exploring. But a couple of weeks ago, I went to one of my favorites because I was in my old neighborhood. Tamara, I didn't realize that we used to be in the same neighborhood. Lewitt View used to be one of my favorite parks. I had to stop by and see it because the views are absolutely stunning. And just the beauty of seeing the investment in the east side of Portland was, I love seeing all of the parks that we've added, but Lewitt View is definitely a favorite.
Thank you, Margaret. And then Juan.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Yes.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah. I guess Forest Park is my go-to park. I take my kids bike riding there, and they like it because the mile markers, and they they try to push themselves to see how far they can ride. So it's always fun to go. But last week I was visiting Hood River, and it's not a Portland park, but the trees, I would echo what others have said about the trees and the colors, and this is as good as it gets for being outside, and in particular bike riding.
Great. Thank you. And then I think we have Brooke in here somewhere, but I don't see Brooke's name. So Brooke, are you there?
No, Brooke is on vacation. She's in Mexico. That's one of the reasons why Nicola is joining us.
Okay. Well, good for her.
Well-earned vacation for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, good. All right. So next item on our agenda is to touch on the notes from our last meeting, and everyone got a chance to look at those. I had shared a couple of small editorial comments. Are there any other questions or comments on the notes from our last meeting? All right. Is there a motion to approve?
So move.
I second that.
Thank you, Alejandro. All right. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Our minutes are approved. Thank you. Director's report.
Great. Thank you, Paul. Good morning, everyone. I echo, I love seeing the fall colors on the trees here, but I've got to say they really pale in comparison to the Northeast. Just saying.
Totally. I didn't want to say that. I was going the inevitable New England comparison, and I didn't do it.
No, but they will do. So thank you for all of that. Also, I just want to remind folks that I sent around a monthly bureau report. I think it got distributed
Yes.
last week. So I'd ask that if everyone could refer to that. And Todd, I just sent you a text asking if you could put the council items in the chat. That's one of the items that I want to start sharing with the board each month. I'm sorry, I didn't give you much time, but you can do it at any point during the meeting. Thank you. So as I'm sure all of you already know, Portland voters approved the park's operating levy on election day.
Woohoo!
Yes, woohoo indeed. This means that we will now be able to maintain neighborhood parks in an appropriate manner. We'll be able to improve access and safety provide equitable recreation programs, and actually proactively care for our natural areas and urban forest. The funding also means that we can reopen our public pools and community centers next summer if public health conditions allow us to do so. Almost 64% of voters chose to approve the levy, and we are grateful for their investment in the park system and their trust in the Bureau. I want to thank all of you board members for your support, your enthusiasm and encouragement throughout this challenging and fast-paced process. I specifically want to thank Randy, everyone at the Parks Foundation, and the Portlanders for Parks campaign team for all of their hard work. And of course, any Parkies who volunteered their time on their personal time to work together with the campaign. I'm so grateful to everyone in the Bureau who has worked so hard to care for our parks, natural areas, gardens, trees, community centers, and pools, all while building trust within our community. I also want to thank the Parks team members who worked on the Sustainable Future Project and to get this ballot measure referred to the voters. They worked incredibly hard over the last 6 months. Finally, I'd like to recognize our friend, the late Commissioner Nick Fish, whose vision and leadership laid the foundation for this important work. It's probably came as no surprise that one of the photos that we used in announcing the levy for the board, to the board and staff, had an image of Nick Fish included in it. As you are all likely aware, the levy funds typically would not be available for us until late next year. However, of course, we anticipated this, and we will work to request an Intrafund loan so that we can get resources working for the community more quickly than by next year. Our initial work will be focused on developing a ramp to prepare the Bureau to increase our services next year. This ramp will support community engagement efforts related to the levy, and it will put transparency and accountability systems in place to allow us to deliver recreation and valued public programs in the summer of 2021. I will, of course, keep the board up to date as we work to prepare the Bureau to operationalize this community investment. I wanted to move on to talk about election and the preparations that park staff took in preparation for that. And we're also at the ready to ramp them back up if need be. Park staff worked with representatives from all of the other city bureaus, Multnomah County, and the Governor's Joint Command to prepare staff, partners, and sites for the impacts resulting from large groups of people gathering before and after the election. As I'm sure you all are aware, we've seen hundreds of peaceful demonstrations during this long year. And with that, some instances of violence when public property has been damaged or vandalized. Since the murder of George Floyd on May 25th, I can't believe it was both that long ago and seems so recent. Portlanders have gathered in parks to exercise their First Amendment rights while demonstrating against police brutality. And I want to reaffirm that I and the Bureau stand with Black, Indigenous, people of color, and immigrants and refugees impacted by police violence and systemic racism. And I stand with the peaceful protesters as well. As a lifelong Parkie, I appreciate the platform that parks offer people to connect and express themselves. And I think we can all agree that the national and local elections do not signal an end to this movement. So we're ready. We will continue to work with our partners, our team members, and others to ensure that our community's parks continue to be safe places for all Portlanders to come together. And finally, a little note, with the end of the year comes a new Parks Commissioner. So our new City Council is taking shape after the election, and Amanda Fritz will remain Commissioner in charge of Parks until her retirement at the end of the year. And we likely won't know who the next Parks Commissioner will be until January. A lot of people are asking. I promise I'm not withholding information. We just don't know as yet. So that's my report. Again, the monthly report, the PDF in the chat for folks to peruse if they haven't had an opportunity to do so. But just want to open the floor and see if anyone has any questions or comments.
Thank you, Dina. Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done yet. I don't know how many people may have caught the clip of Van Jones on CNN on Saturday, just talking about, again, the sort of being able to breathe theme and just being father to African-American sons, just how important the results of last week's election were to him. And, you know, that work remains to be done. And I was recalling some of our notes from our retreat in June in how public safety in our parks was really a key concern that many of our board members shared. And there's a lot of work to be done there yet. So I think there's a lot to be encouraged about, and there's a lot of work still to be done that will be on our plate here for the rest of this year and probably into next year as well. Other thoughts or comments?
Hey, Paul, it's Casey. I just had a comment and a question. First off, and Dina, I wanted to thank you and your staff and everybody at the foundation for all the great work they did in getting the levy passed. It was actually amazing to see how well it passed and how much that means in terms of the parks being such a great asset for the city and how beloved they are. I also wanted to thank you for your thank you as well, because I thought that little video of you was just fantastic. The question I had is, in determining the priorities for where the funding is going to go, is there anything the board can do to help? And I'm thinking along informational gathering, community meetings, anything like that. And then also, have you developed a priority list in terms of the factors you are looking to prioritize where the funding is going to go first?
Well, I'm going to take a stab, and then I'm going to tap out and have maybe Claudia or Todd. We did a lot of work in advance of the levy to scope out what it was that we needed and what the levy would be could feasibly support. So we did a lot of work on the front end, but indeed there is a lot more work to be done on the back end, or rather as we ramp up, because as you know, the process was a bit truncated. While we were able to do quite a bit of community engagement prior, ideally we would have done a lot more. So we're working to do that now, and we will continue to do that work. The board will be invited to participate in many ways, and we'll, again, this will be a large part of our report out moving forward. And I'll ask Todd or Claudio to add anything that I may have missed, any specifics.
Maybe I'll just jump in on some of the entry points for the board that on your question there. So the Budget Advisory Committee for Parks will both reviewing the FY 2021-22 budget, which needs to be, we're working on it now. We'll be meeting with the Budget Advisory Committee, of which Parks Board members are on in November, December, January. It needs to be in by the end of January. During the same time, we'll be going through the initial process, as Director Long just said, about building the ramp. So there's things that the organization needs, like space for new workers to have yard space that are going to be caring for trees or natural areas, or there might be equipment that have very long lead times that we need. The human resource piece of it, as we scale up, to hire, we would normally have, 1,700 workers in the summer working recreation. Our recreation workforce now is about 150. So there's a very big ramp up to get the organizational capacity. And so those are the types of things that you'll see in the Budget Advisory Committee. We'll see as well as part of Intrafund loan. And again, our timing for that is to synchronize it with the proposed budget for FY 21-22 by the end of January. another opportunity, I think, for Parks Board members and the community at large is the community advisory oversight body. And so that's something that we will be working to get out soon, and then that people can apply to, and that's another entry point. And then a third, which is different from the board, but there's no exclusion of why board members couldn't be participating in this process as well, is the community engagement process. So we started already with some multilingual community engagement sessions this past month. There'll be much more of that going forward. And one of the things I think you'll also see in what we're calling the ramp, or referred to as year zero, because as Adina said, the funding for the levy doesn't really start coming in the tax collections till November 2021. So you can think of, we're in year zero. Year one starts in November 2021. And so during that time, there's a big community engagement process that will be going on. So we'll be doing community grants that we have never done before, about building the capacity of culturally specific organizations to help inform the decision-making around how levy funds are spent. And, you know, we talked broadly, prior to the levy referral, and then during the campaign, if you just order of magnitude, just to think about a third of the levy funds take the fee dependency away from the recreation division to make them whole. And about 2/3 goes to parks maintenance, natural areas, trees, routine repair and maintenance of our facilities. So that's kind of, what we've brought, kind of broad strokes. And then it's really about the refinement of how we go about that and the points of emphasis of those expenditures. But Claudia, you can jump in, or maybe if you have follow-up clarifying questions, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'll just jump in real quick with sort of process. I think everything that Todd described in terms of the larger investments, the decision making is going to be timed with with the arrival of those funds next fall. So we're really going to be aiming for basically this time next year, with the fall bump, to be doing the bulk of that first tranche of investments. But this year, in the short time frame that we've got between levy passage and January, when we need to deliver the 21-22 budget, and also we're trying to time that, really bring the 21-22 budget into alignment with this interfund loan supplemental budget for this year. So really thinking of it as all of those near-term things will continue into 21-22, but really trying to keep that as tightly focused around summer programming 2021, building that ramp, and addressing any other sort of critical near-term potential failures, and really just trying to focus on mitigating risk. So with those three key focus areas, that's what we're going to be targeting for the end of January, delivery of the budget, and the delivery of what is going to be a supplemental budget that relies on that interfund loan. So, but then like Todd said, that vast the vast bulk of investments are going to be teed up for next fall.
Thank you. Just going back again to celebrating the passage of the levy. Yes, 64% approval is a great accomplishment, and a lot of people worked hard, after hours, donated money. I want to give a special nod to Randy, because he worked tirelessly to get a lot of the endorsements that came from the Oregonian, Willamette Week, sources that people rely on. And that, was largely based on his credibility and just working his tail off. So I want to especially acknowledge Randy's efforts to help push us well over the top on this, and not to belittle anyone else's contributions, but I think Randy really helped to do a lot for this campaign.
Well said.
Okay, I think that brings us, oh, thank you. That brings us to the working group reports. And Tamara, I don't know if you have a new name for the group that was previously known as the Community Development Group, but we're curious to hear what your report is.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. We're kind of just calling it what it is since that's what's known, but we haven't, made anything official. I just want to start off by saying we, had a great discussion. It was great to just get a little bit deeper into some concepts and just thoughts on how the board is going. It was mostly, some of our new members. So I think, it was helpful to get a bit deeper into things. And I'll just share a little bit of highlights and then open it up to folks who were there if they want to add anything. But we talked a lot about just the influential power of the board and the committees. What power do we have to make change or influence change? We talked about the need to kind of develop a mechanism to hear more from the ground up. So hear more from the community, in addition to staff and, Adina's great report, just things like that, how to balance things out. And then we also talked about developing more of a shared understanding. So we've brought this up in full board meetings about having trainings or webinars or readings or anything to kind of build our knowledge together and hold each other accountable across the board and also in these working groups. So those were some of the main things, but I'll open it up. There's quite a few of us there if people have thoughts or something that stood out to them. Did I cover everything? So we had Alejandra and Aaron and Juan, Tim and Kenya were there.
Sounds like you did a good job in summarizing there, Tamara.
I see some unmuting.
I just want to say, like, one of the things that we did at the beginning that I thought was really helpful was that, oh gosh, I'm forgetting exactly what we called it, but the shared definitions. We had shared definitions for words like racial equity and policy and even community development versus community engagement. And I felt like that, just that exercise is something that would be helpful for the whole board when we enter into discussions. Like, I know we're looking at the, what I forget what it's called, the equity statement or whatnot.
Yes.
Doing that in advance of us looking at it in small groups, I think is a really helpful thing that we could bring to the full board. So I just wanted to add that.
Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah, so thanks for bringing that up. We did, pull up some definitions just for our discussion, but yeah, that was something that we could do a bit more of going forward. And just in terms of next steps, because there was just such a great discussion and it also brought up probably more questions than answers, I felt. We are thinking it is probably best to develop a proposal together. So this is something that myself and Alejandra and Pune would lead and keep, tapping into the small group and hopefully the larger group as well to get some feedback so that we can have more of a concrete outline for, the kind of the support needs for the group and also what it would look like in terms of how it engages with the full board, potentially the community, those types of things, and really lay it out in more detail. So that's what would happen over the next, 2 or 3 months. Hopefully in the new year, we'd have something, substantial to work off of. But yeah, that's kind of the next steps going forward.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
Paul, this is Adina. I know that Kenya and Tim were there mostly to, provide any sort of background information regarding our efforts, but I would hope that we can continue to participate so that, one, we can keep the committee grounded in what the Bureau is, how the Bureau is participating in these areas, but then also to sort of ground truth, just because so many of the members are newer to the Parks Board and may not have as full a base of knowledge of our work.
Yeah, we definitely want to make sure there's good communication and coordination so that, the outcomes to the broader community, because really our focus is how do we help Portland Parks deliver quality services to the full community of Portland. And we know that there's substantial differences in access to parks, services across the city. So I see our community development group being an asset that we can use to help us help parks deliver those services more equitably. So I think there's a clear need for coordination and communication to make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciated Kenya and Tim being there, both as a listening ear to help, kind of clarify anything. And also, I think it was just helpful to keep the transparency going. Moving forward too, I think having some, kind of proposal where we can outline our ideas more thoroughly will help kind of see how we can align together. And yeah, I can certainly loop Kenya and Tim in there where it seems appropriate or where they'd like to be engaged.
Great. Okay. And then we'll move, unless there are any questions, we'll move to Mike Elliott's report on the Financial Sustainability Working Group.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So first off, I'm having some connectivity issues, so hopefully the audio is going to work through this. So our working group actually needed to reschedule this month's meeting to next week, Friday, as Claudio had a related conflict. In fact, he actually was in a second reading meeting with City Council to finalize the fall bump. So I don't have a lot to report, but I will give you a quick summary of the results from that meeting. Most of the expected budget modifications that we've been talking about in prior board meetings were finalized at pretty close to the levels that we did. There was one positive adjustment, and that was holdbacks for major maintenance. We previously expected $1 million holdback, but council reduced that number in reductions. So because those reductions aren't as large as what were expected, replacement of the Farragut Park restroom, that was expected to be held back for the year. And then there were a couple of amendments. An additional $110,000 was allocated from the general fund to support Pioneer Square restroom and some other related protest damage and security. And then I mentioned at the last meeting that there'd be an Intrafund bridge loan, and Adina and Todd both touched on this. It's going to accelerate a couple of levy related projects. One of them is $250,000 is being directed to support planning for the Interstate Firehouse Cultural Center. This money is actually going to come from an existing general fund allocation, and it'll be reimbursed by from the Intrafund loan. And then there's also funding for, we've talked about this a little bit, for a new levy coordinator, full-time employee position. That's going to also be supported from the general fund until the loan proceeds come in. All in budget line item for this is probably about $175,000. And then finally, Claudio mentioned, touched a little bit on the fact that the budgeting process is going to change a little bit for the next year or two as a result of the levy. Claudio, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to what you've already said about that, but this would be a good chance.
No, I think that covers it, but happy to take any questions though.
Good report, Mike. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions or thoughts? Okay, Patty, you're up.
Okay, thank you. Well, we covered really a number of topics, so I'll touch on each of them briefly. The first one was the Ross. There was nothing to report then, but since then, ODOT has announced that they've modified their design so that it will no longer overwhelm the East Side Esplanade Walk, which is very good news. They've also announced that they're moving forward. So it's been on hold for a while, as many of you know. So we're watching with interest to see what the published differences actually are. Staff may have seen them, but we have not yet seen those. The South Park Blocks plan, a historic designation has been sought relating to the public open space designation and land which is occupied by proposed road and bikeway. There's been no hearing yet, so there'll be more news on that yet to come. The South Reach plan, it went to council last week, and I don't have any more details on that. The off-road bike trails, which you remember was quite a battle last year. Amanda Fritz has very wisely asked BPS to slow that process down until the new year, when a new parks commissioner will be appointed, given the complex and potentially inflammatory nature of the issues involved. So I think that was a wise move. Southwest Corridor, as you know, the metro measure failed. So progress had been good. There was some agreement reached on mitigation for the OHSU hill climb, and Urban Forestry was happy with parks negotiations elsewhere in the corridor. In all likelihood, that will go on hold for a couple of years. Presumably there will be another attempt at funding to a more modest level, but that's not unlikely to happen until November 22. Burnside Bridge replacement, it's a lengthy process. They've got to the point of selecting three, or rather two long spans, rather than having, for example, the Forest of Columns in Waterfront Park that we have now. There's probably going to be one point of support in Waterfront Park, and the span will then go from the new piers in the river all the way to the ramp on the west side of Nato Parkway. On the east side, the long span of 650 feet will go clear across the freeway, the railroad, and the skate park, all of which are on seismically unstable land. So the idea is to step over that seismically unstable land so that the bridge will be secure after a major seismic event. The decision on actual bridge type and form will not occur until next year. Grant Park improvements. There's been a lot of public confusion because there are two separate actions here. One is a Type 3 application for the upper field, which includes lights, and completion of that will sort out a Title 9 problem, enabling girls to play softball there rather than having to travel a mile away. All of the other improvements are part of the phase 2, so-called phase 2 work, which is proceeding as we reported before. Exceptions to tree removal restrictions in industrial zones has been a matter of some concern, and there was a hearing on this recently, since we met, a report was submitted amending the language with which the urban forestry is now comfortable, and actually that's available on the net at 220 proposed tree code amendments. And that, I think, concludes it. Others who were there, Bonnie, and oh, we were graced by Adina this as well. Thank you very much. Anyone else who was there have comments, additions? I think that's
That's
it.
a good summary.
Thank you.
I have a question. Hello.
It's gone.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm new to the board, so I wasn't here for the discussions of last year. You said that the off-road bicycling projects were heavily contested.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that? Just to give me a little background.
Yes. Although this is actually, we only have an advisory capacity in this. This is a project which is being handled by BPS, the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. We were heavily lobbied by the off-road bicycle group, who really wanted to force some kind of action. In the past, the board has reviewed this and other matters relating to the Forest Park, and we have been advised by expert witnesses that since the 90s, there have been a lot of attempts to do things in Forest Park, and at that time, it was recognized that we actually don't know what we've got. And the advice then was, until we have an inventory of the plant and animal communities that exist within Forest Park, we shouldn't be introducing potentially damaging activities such as paths for mountain biking. So that work was never funded, has never occurred, but is still very much needed. So I think the parks is in this difficult position of wanting to be cooperative, and yet feeling that we have a very clear responsibility to safeguard the very special natural features of Forest Park and understand what they are. There's a lot of concern about root damage, about erosion. There's also human concern about people on foot reportedly being hit or very nearly hit by speeding bicycles. All of that needs to be sorted out. But the priority, I think, from the outset has been we need to know what we've got before we start inserting new pathways. Anything to add to that?
Really,
there are others who know more about this than I do.
I think that's a really good summary, Patty. What I was going to add was, just for background, Juan and others who are new to the board, that yes, we were heavily lobbied by the mountain biking community, but also by neighbors who were concerned for a variety of reasons that Patty just mentioned. You know, concerns about habitat impacts, concerns about water quality from potential erosion, safety issues about mixing high-speed bicyclists with people walking. And what really struck me through the process, and we had several meetings where there were people from both perspectives, the trail user advocating for bicycle access and neighbors. And to me, what was the sad takeaway was that these are people who under some circumstances would be considered allies in terms of providing trail access to the community, but is so typical of our times. We're looking at it through a very narrow lens, each of these communities, and they were speaking, but they weren't listening to each other. It felt to me like there were missed opportunities to build some bridges between these groups, which both care very much about our parks. So that was a disappointing takeaway for me, that we have these trail users who could be united in improving trail access and trail conditions across the city, but instead we're fighting over who gets to do what where. So that was my take, and you know, if others see it differently, I want to hear that. But that was sort of my summary of how that whole process felt after we'd been through it for months and months.
One thing I might add is that in the course of looking at Forest Park, we've also looked at other opportunities throughout the city. And the thought is we should take really a city-wide approach to this whole thing of mountain bike access and opportunity, and direct that action more to less sensitive parts of the city. There is already a substantial network of such pathways, and one of the things we've looked at is how can we interconnect those and really leave Forest Park out of the system until we have these things sorted out.
Yeah, thank you. This is great background. During our community, the reason why I'm asking is because during our community engagement meeting, we discussed briefly how certain groups, perhaps small groups, but very vocal, have had access to the board in the past and to the board's ears in the past, even though perhaps they represent a very tiny segment of the community and with a very narrow scope of interest, such as the mountain bikers, and how I want to put this in a very PR way. Certain narrow segment of the population has a lot of voice when it comes to what is being done and where and whatnot. So to me, that's very interesting. I am a mountain biker myself. I think I've said that a million times. And within the mountain biking community, there is a lot of push to participate, get involved, advocate, etc. I wish I saw that within the Latino community and within other people. Say participate, get involved, go there, go to the board meeting. Perhaps they don't have the time because perhaps they're working. This is very interesting background. It helps me a lot. Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, thanks for that report, Patty. And then next up, we'll have Bonnie on the process improvement ad hoc committee.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, so before we let that piece go, just also to give you a better sense of the timeline, I just want to let you know that the issue with the mountain biking, it wasn't last year, it was about, I think, 4 years ago at this point. So in the context of, so this has been festering kind of now for a while, and I only bring that up because I actually wasn't on the board when that happened. So I think the only people who were on the board, who remain on the board when those hearings occurred, are in fact maybe Patty, Paul, maybe Jenny and Ian, I think, unless there's somebody I'm forgetting who is still, because when our group came in, which included Katie, Tamara, who else was in our group? Katie and Tamara, maybe just us. It had already happened. So just to give you a sense of timeline a little bit more. And also, as Patty was talking, and also Todd, it occurs to me, I don't know if other people, this is not related to process improvement, so I apologize for going off agenda for a moment. Maybe other people have received the notice, but Metro is recruiting for members of its advisory committee for its nature investment board. So I think that somebody from this group, if they were so inclined and had extra time to give, I think would be a really valuable member of that committee. I don't know if that's something that is of interest to people. I don't have more time to give, and I feel like I want to be able to focus on the work of this board, but I will find that link and put it in the chat because I think that folks on this board would be great for that. And because I was thinking about the fact that the transportation bond did not pass, but the nature investment one from the last go round did. So on to process improvement, I actually don't have much to report because Jennifer Allen did produce a draft kind of summary document of what happened with that group. It went out in draft form and was going to get revised and then sent back out, but as of yet I haven't seen the revised version. I think that her draft did a good job. I think of all the issues that I brought up to you guys as we were having our meetings, which is to be sure to emphasize outcomes for community members and ensure the kind of coverage and kind of equity that we want in our tree planting program, to ensure the efficiencies that Nick Fish was really seeking when he put together the cross-bureau coordination effort. So as soon as that is available, I will share it with you all. I don't know if Jen has anything to add maybe, or any of the other folks, staff who were there, or if there were any questions, but like I said, not much to report until we get that revised narrative.
Well, Bonnie, I wanted to particularly thank you for calling out the Nature Investment Board opportunity with Metro. I think that's great. And hopefully someone from our board has the bandwidth to do that, because I think that sort of cross-pollination would be wonderful. And it's not me, unfortunately.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for that report. And I think we'll move on to Randy's report from the foundation.
Sure. So I thought it might be fun to just have a little peek under the hood of the Levy campaign. These things are kind of mysterious, I think, for folks who haven't ever done one. It certainly was to me until I had done one now. So first, I want to underline, we didn't just win, we won resoundingly, 64%. But I want to go back in time for a little bit and recall that the first public poll showed only 28% definitely yes, and 27% maybe yes. So our job was to turn that 27% into definites. I want to point out also, if we had had organized opposition, we might have had a lot of trouble because we had just 13 weeks. For me personally, as I said, this was entirely new terrain. I'd never worked on a campaign, much less been effectively the political leader of one. And some members of my board were pretty reluctant, to say the least, as had we lost, the foundation would have been taking the blame, at least in some part. But we won, and so I'd kind of like to outline exactly where credit is due. I want to echo what Adina said, and acknowledging the early work of Commissioner Nick Fish on the Sustainable Future Initiative, which really laid the groundwork for even thinking about a levy. And without that, even with the crisis wrought by COVID-19 with PPR, any new funding initiative would have been dead on arrival. So that was really important work. And because of that work, TPL, Trust for Public Land, and Nature Conservancy, and Nike, were up for funding a deeper poll, which was really important to telling us what arguments we needed to persuade that 27%. But even with all that, front end work, we began, months behind every other money measure on the ballot, and we did it with, effectively, I have to say, no city hall leadership. The mayor, Parks was in the mayor's office, and he was busy with a lot of things. And so, we were really, kind of playing this role that was, extremely unusual for us. Thankfully, our board chair, Jules Bailey, has a lot of experience in campaigns. And in the earliest days, even before the referral, I brought in the Gallatin group, which had been really helpful in the Parks bond a few years ago. And they did some work, ridiculously discounted work, to offer some critical advice for messaging even before referral. We hired a really great campaign strategist, Amy Ruiz, at Strategies 360. And based on a technical analysis, her team calculated we needed to raise about $400,000 to reach and persuade that 27% to switch from maybe to yes. And so the fundraising and endorsement hunt began. And I can't speak for the others who volunteered and made calls, but my board, most notably Patricia Frobes, Karen Kervin, and Jules and we together made over 250 calls for fundraising. And I got to say, none of us are Nick Fish, not just because we don't have, what was Nick's undiluted love of politics and fundraising and his charismatic spirit. But we also didn't have any power. We weren't sitting in City Hall, and traditional funders were watching their buildings empty out and their businesses face extreme uncertainty as the pandemic ensued. And you know, they were scared and they were mad and they felt abandoned by City Hall. And, you know, on a lot of those calls, all I could do was offer a sympathetic ear, but I couldn't even pretend that I could do anything to help them. We heard no's from people I would have never imagined turning away from parks. And I think that's just testimony to the depths of the pandemic and all the other things vying for people's money. We also got yeses from people I would have thought were long shots, like a contractor from Gresham who told me, well, you know, Portland's got a lot of problems, but, you know, it's the heart of our region. It's got to have good parks. And in the end, we raised a respectable 180K. And over half of that was from individual donors and businesses, you know, contacted by the Portland Parks Foundation or reached through our mailing list. The other key player on the money and volunteer side was labor. Absolutely critical in raising the second largest amount of money, and then also offering a huge amount of pro bono help on the campaign. They even hired somebody to work on it. And then, as always, there was Nike and Julia Brim Edwards, whose early support of the polling and a final injection of support into the campaign played, you know, very big strategic roles. Beyond money, there were a lot of endorsements and volunteers. We were kind of the Big Ten of the money measures. You know, we had, you know, endorsements from frontline community groups like Rosewood and Verde and Latino Network to labor unions to the environmental community, not all of whom were, you know, easy to get, by the way, because I didn't think they didn't really see themselves in this levy, but we had to do a lot of convincing. And then I think it's important to understand the role of business in this. PBA's endorsement, I think, was really, really important. You know, I mean, there's a lot of emphasis, as well there should be, on communities of color in East Portland in terms of our endorsement strategy and whatnot. And that's really about, you know, getting out the vote. It's not so much that you have to convince people, it's that you actually have to get them out to vote. PBA's endorsement, I think, actually was important to persuading existing voters who might well have said, you know, nah, I don't want to pay more taxes. So, as always, many hands make heavy work much lighter, and it was an amazing team effort. Again, I can't overemphasize the importance of labor's volunteers, key among them, folks from PPR who offered strategic help on their own time and you know, legwork on their own time, really, really important. The magic of Amy's team, particularly the campaign manager, Levin, and the comms director, TJ McGew, who was magic on social media. I just made, at least my social media feed was like wallpaper of Parks, you know, communications. And so to all of those who contributed their volunteer energy and time who are here, thank you. Thank you so much. So for the foundation, we now have to pivot to our fall campaign and you know, for our own operations. And in many ways, actually, passage of the levy kind of hurts us. I think that most people don't know the difference between PPR, PPF, or even that matter, the Parks Board. And so I hope you'll all help us spread the word that the Portland Parks Foundation was essential to passing this levy. But now, if you really love parks and you need to help us, you need to help us do what we do more generally, which are things that parks can't do. So we, you know, stepped into this void, and next year is our 20th anniversary. We want to finish the year, you know, in the black, and go into next year with a, you know, knockout series of initiatives, which now we actually have time to think about now that the levy's in the rearview mirror. So with that, thanks for giving me a little bit of time to talk about that. And next month I'll talk to you about what we actually are going to do.
That's great, Randy. Thank you. Really appreciate it. And the background is very helpful. I mean, it was a real effort on many people's part, and it's really helpful to have that full story. So I appreciate that a lot. Okay, so we have 7 minutes until the commissioner joins us, and we want to have at least start a conversation about considering moving our meeting time. So we offered some times, and I heard from people that a morning meeting that was a little bit later, that would be easier for people with childcare responsibilities in the morning would be appreciated. So I'm totally open to, like, if we want to start at a 9 o'clock hour, I just want to hear from folks what are some preferences, and we can then have a conversation, which will interrupt in 6 minutes.
Hi, Paul. As someone with childcare needs, I would say 9 a.m. It's a bit more convenient for me.
Okay. Thank you, Alejandro. So anyone else? I mean, it's an easy thing to do to change from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock. We also offered sort of a midday meeting opportunity and an end of day meeting opportunity. I'm taking it from the feedback received so far that a morning meeting seems to work well for everyone, but this is a good opportunity for people to say otherwise if that is the case. Well, I think we're going to change to 9 o'clock on Tuesdays, the second Tuesday of the month, and that will make it easier for those with childcare responsibilities in the morning. And any other thoughts or comments at this point? We're actually going to be ahead of time. This is amazing. Okay, great. All right. Well, stay tuned for our new meeting time from 9 to 11. So we've got a few minutes here. We've got just under 5 minutes until the commissioner joins us. I thought what we could do to fill that time, rather than start on our update on the affirmation of equity statement, let's see. I didn't think I'd be in this position where I'd have to fill some time. So let's see. Let's go back to our retreat, our abbreviated retreat in June. And I mentioned this earlier in the meeting, the concerns that many people have about safety in our parks. And I'd really like to see us as the board help PP&R with some advice on how do we improve that so that everyone feels safe in our parks. And I don't have a good conception of how we do that, but it feels really important to me. As we were sharing at the beginning of the meeting, all of us have been, well, almost all of us, a handful of us have been closer to home, but many of us have been out and enjoying the parks and enjoying seeing other people and their families enjoying parks. And that is a key function of parks, that we don't want to have the specter of, intimidation by people who just don't have a very broad-minded view of the world. It's a difficult thing to get on top of, but Portland Parks is striving to be an anti-racist organization. So it's part of our responsibility to help parks become that organization and to implement those policies. So I'm curious, in the next 3 minutes, if there are any thoughts or reactions to that, and or any notions about how we might move forward to achieve that agenda.
And Paul, maybe I'll just add to that topic just a few things that are happening at the Bureau around this.
Great.
For both employee and public safety, those are key topics that we found as areas of improvement for our employee survey. And so we'll be developing working teams on those topics within the Bureau. And I think that we could come back to the board with maybe some suggestions and entry points of how you might be able to review that work or bring it to the full board or bring it to a committee. So that's just an opportunity. Likewise, I think this topic will be important for the levy and specifically a topic that we'll be funding with culturally specific organizations about how to make sure our programs and public spaces are welcoming. So I think there are some near and medium term opportunities that we could find ways to either bring it to the full board or work through a subcommittee.
Thanks, Todd. I mean, just to add my 2 cents, of the opportunities here, it seems like given the size, of Portland parks, that our park ranger population is low relative to our city population. So I like to see some conversation about using some of the levy money to hire additional park rangers, just to help promote safety for staff and for visitors across our park system. Thoughts or comments? Okay, well, it's a quiet group this morning. We've got just a little bit here before the commissioner shows up. I guess we'll just wait here in the next 30 seconds or so until Commissioner Fritz shows up.
Paul, this is Vicente. I'll briefly comment on what you just said. I appreciate that support. If the board is interested on how they could support an effort in that regard, there's a couple ways we can look at this. There's a policy that we're doing for the Bureau. It's called the SAFE policy. And we're actually looking at all of the ways we can prepare our staff to know what's available to them in terms of safety. So that's kind of an internal tool that we're looking at. We're also updating our Red Book. That's already done, but just a FYI, I think the last one in terms of ranger support, growth of the ranger program is good. Right growth is better. I think we're working on our strategic plan. We are working on our strategic plan right now to make sure that our growth can be not only grow in numbers to support our city, but grow the right way so that we can actually produce a product that is sustainable and as dynamic as it can be to serve Portland in the best way it can. So I just wanted to just throw that out there and again, appreciate that support.
Terrific, Vicente. Thank you. I'm really happy to hear that and look forward to hearing more about the SAFE policy and how we can help with strategic growth that's right-sized growth. So that makes a lot of sense. Okay.
Well, Commissioner Fritz has arrived.
Hooray. Welcome, Commissioner Fritz. It's wonderful to have you today.
Sorry about that. I'm a bit technologically challenged, especially at this early hour. And first of all, thank you for being even earlier to this meeting. Your dedication is really amazing. And I so appreciate the advice you give, the input you give, just everything you've done. And I know many of you worked really hard to pass the levy. I see Randy on my screen and I know he did. So thank you very, very much for that. I'm sure that Adina already thanked you or celebrated, but just wanted to come and say hooray. And thank you for all the great work you do. It's been really interesting knowing you over the years. And so basically just came to say thank you.
Wonderful. Well, we appreciate your support. Is there anything that we can share with you, or how can we best communicate this morning?
I think it would be very helpful if the Parks Board was to prepare your own briefing paper for whoever your next commissioner is, kind of introducing yourself, get to know them, whoever it might be, and share your agenda and the things that are primarily of concern. I mean, obviously sharing some of the successes that you've been able to guide in the Parks Bureau, but that I think is the kind of the number one issue on many of our minds right now, is preparing for the next council, and not just the commissioner in charge either. It's going to be a very new council with 3 members who don't obviously have been very invested in the city, but not as from the inside. And I certainly found out it's different on the inside, isn't it? I'm sure each of you did too. It seems so easy. We could just fix everything when you're just sitting at home reading in the newspaper, but it really isn't. So making a point to invite your next commissioner and to spend time with them, I think is going to be just huge.
Terrific. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then appreciate your advice that way.
And I think obviously the other thing is the implementation of the levy and your guidance to staff as they put together the plan for how we're going to do outreach and who's going to be engaged. You've done such a great job of reaching out to different communities that I'm sure the staff would really appreciate your assistance in that process. There's one other insider thing that I'm going to tell you, and that is that we are obviously in support of the Black Lives Matter movement, and we're also looking at some of the park names and structures in the parks. So I haven't fully formulated the plan yet, but I will tell you that I am going to do an executive order to unname a park, because it's just a reprehensible name, and you can all spend time deciding which one is the most reprehensible of all of our challenging names. But that announcement is going to be coming before your next meeting.
Well,
any hints of which one it'll be?
Anybody want to guess? Well, then I'm not going to tell you. No, I will. It's Custer Park in Southwest. So, you know, this is a secret, everybody. We haven't fully formulated the plan, and I need to go tell the neighborhood association that I'm going to do that. But I've lived in Southwest now for nearly 35 years, and it's bothered me for a very long time that we have somebody who's got no connections whatsoever to Oregon or Portland, and just things that are renowned the world over as terrible things. So that's my little bit of a gem of a nugget of information that you're the first to hear. And as I say, I would appreciate your not sharing it yet, so that we can do it all in the right order. But it wouldn't seem right to not tell you and have you read it in the paper. I hate it when I read things in the paper that I feel like I should have been told.
Well, thank you for your confidence. We will not steal your thunder, and we appreciate being the first to know.
Thank you. I'm off to go do the legislative agenda with the City Council, which is why I'm just popping in and popping out again. So again, thank you so much, and thank you to each of you who've been in the leadership roles on the board. Much, much appreciated.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okie dokie. All right. So we've got some agenda time devoted to the update on the affirmation of equity statement. And I read over the minutes from last time. I just wanted to open this up for additional conversation in terms of you know, where we're at and how strong we want to support equity going forward.
You ever say that, Paul? Sorry, I didn't quite get what we're doing. Are you wanting something from us?
Yes. So what we have on our agenda is the topic of an update on the affirmation of equity statement. So there was time spent at the last board meeting addressing this. And I just wanted to make sure, because it's an important piece, I wanted to make sure that we gave it a full airing. So I wanted to hear if there were additional thoughts or comments on this, and then, you know, move forward with those.
My memory was, it seemed like there was a lot of agreement on the need to revise that it's old. It's from 2014, and maybe to be more in alignment with the work that Parks itself is doing. But I don't know. That was kind of my takeaway. I don't know what the next steps for that would be, if there would be a group that would work on that.
Yeah, I mean, that was my thinking, that we could have a small group. I didn't see doing an editing exercise as the full board, but we had volunteers to a group of, 3 to 5 who would redraft it and put it into language that feels current for 2020, and then bring that back to the board. That seemed like the appropriate way to address this. So I see some heads nodding. Do we have people who'd be willing to volunteer to create a draft that we would then share with the full board?
I would be happy to support in that.
Great. Thank you, Alejandra.
I'm happy to participate. I feel like my best role is to help with editing and sort of synthesizing people's ideas. So I'm happy to kind of come in once there's a, like we called it in my former life as a journalist, the dump draft.
Yes.
And you've got kind of all the ideas out there and you're trying to synthesize them. I feel like that's a good spot for me to help out.
And similarly, I feel like that's a good role for myself as well. So I'm happy to be part of this. So we probably need someone other than Alejandra to generate this, since she's new to the board. Do we have another person who'd be willing to do the initial lift? All right, I may need to do some after the meeting recruiting to add another person to our committee. But at this point, we have Alejandra, Randy, and myself, and we'll see where it goes from there. Are there any other thoughts or notions that we would want to cover on this topic while we have time together as the board?
Paul, I see the board's equity statement as separate and distinct from Parks. But as there seems to be a little bit of time on the agenda, I'd like to invite Kenya Williams to maybe provide the board with some insight on some work that he's doing around redeveloping the Parks Bureau equity statement. It might inform your process, but maybe at least just provide some information about work that the Bureau is doing. Kenya, sorry to put you on the, there you go.
It's all good. It's all good. That's what I'm here for. So it was brought to our attention through our Diversity and Equity Committee, the policy subcommittee of the Bureau's Diversity and Equity Committee, that we did not have a racial equity lens. There's a lot of talk about using a racial equity lens. It's, if I'm not mistaken, it's within the first objective in our racial equity plan. So I've made it a priority to develop a Bureau racial equity lens, and also develop a Bureau equity statement. And what I've been doing in the last few weeks is seeking the advice of internal stakeholders within our Bureau. And when I say internal stakeholders, I mean some of the employee support groups, such as FEST, which stands for Fostering Equity Support Team, also various diversity and equity committees that are part of different divisions, and also directly after this meeting, I'll be meeting with a group that is comprised of our diversity and equity committee subgroup that initially brought this to our attention. As far as process, I did not want to create an equity statement or look at an equity lens in a vacuum. Really thinking more so, a bottom-up approach where Bureau staff can take ownership of the equity lens development, but also the Bureau equity statement. One other key component of all of this is actually developing communication around how to use the equity lens. And so folks can operationalize equity work. And it's a little bit more than just a statement, or it's a little bit more than words on a page. The other aspect of it is it being a tool or a tool of many tools that we have that can help staff, and regardless of classification, think about decision making through equity or centering equity. And I think that's a big component of workshopping the development of the lens so people feel empowered, but also it's a tool for engagement internally so folks actually have an understanding that we are serious about becoming an anti-racist organization, and they all have a part in this work.
Thank you, Kenny. That's great background. Okay, well, I
have a question.
Sure.
Go ahead, Randy.
In terms of the Bureau's efforts, I'm curious how outside organizations figure in terms, Dina mentioned, what was the phrase, building capacity in culturally specific, communities. And I mean, one of the things that was kind of interesting, I will say about working on the levy was, we did well with some, large culturally specific organizations, some of whom I mentioned. But there were a lot of folks that were not at the table, and it was it was interesting. And I fully say that the foundation owns this too. It's like our relationships are not strong with a lot of these organizations, more grassroots, frontline, but and there were a lot of people who just sat out. And and you could rationalize it as like, well, they're busy. It's Black Lives Matter. There's other funding measures that are more important to to them. A lot of people were working on Metro, but at the same time, it did not feel like we had those relationships either through PPR or through the foundation. And so as I'm just kind of curious how the external community will be informing the internal Bureau's policies in this regard.
So from when you say policies, are you specifically speaking about equity work or policies for the Bureau in general?
The equity work.
Okay, so I'll be real frank here. Traditionally, there has been a gatekeeper effect with reaching out and doing outreach to a lot of our immigrant refugee community leaders. A lot of that request is superficial, and those relationships are. Typically, it's sending an email to a few people to disperse amongst their community, and you cross your fingers and you hope folks show up. It's more so about starting to teach everyone how to fish versus giving them the fish. I think it's about building genuine relationships and not being dependent on just ourselves, who do the work in the city. I think we have a community engagement team that has strong relationships. Our, members of our equity team, we have strong relationships with community members. And one of the things that, in the few months that I've been here, it has been about, okay, when you send me the email, you send our team members the email, it's about saying, let me make an introduction and let's start building a relationship, and let's not create this transactional relationship. It's really like checking in with these community members, checking in with these organizations. We absolutely need nothing from them. And that's where it has to start. And I think that's really part of, centering equity and going forward of, just having a conversation, and not just saying, oh, now I need, 50 people from your organization or your constituency to show up. That has been the model. That has been the model in government. That has been the model in the nonprofit sector. It works for some people. I don't think it's good enough. And I don't want to continue with that model, as an equity manager at Parks. We recently, and I'll let Tim speak a little bit more about this. Sorry to put you on the spot, Tim, but Tim is engaging communities. And, we're getting a better understanding of what, some of our communities need without actually, having any, particular requests, and just engaging different communities and community leaders. So if Tim wants to expand more about his team's recent, community conversations, I mean, that's another way we're having conversations with our stakeholders externally. So, that's, I hope that answers your question, but that's the direction that, we're heading in order to engage our external, constituents and stakeholders.
No, it's very much, I appreciate the candor.
Thanks, Kenya. From a community engagement standpoint, what we've done in the past, again, I started in February, so I lack some institutional knowledge, but from my experiences, we've gone out and engaged local neighborhoods when we have done capital improvements. If we're rehabbing a park or building a new park, we want to make sure that people, that we're talking to folks about what they want from their neighborhood park. We're going to be shifting, this levy is going to give us an opportunity to kind of change the culture of how we engage the community. So moving beyond capital projects and having and building, authentic relationships with communities who have traditionally been marginalized and are currently being marginalized, to understand what they need from the park system, for them to feel welcome, for them to feel safe, and for them to benefit from the system that we're responsible for managing. So prior to the referral of the ballot measure for the levy, we hosted a lot of community information sessions to let folks know about the challenges and the opportunities facing the Bureau. One of those was for immigrant and refugee communities. It was by far the largest attended information session, largely in part because of Salam Subedi's amazing relationships throughout the community. But I feel like we had over 150 immigrant and refugee leaders from the city of Portland who are in that conversation, who are hearing about the challenges and the opportunities and letting us know what their barriers are and what their community's barriers have been. After the referral, we hosted, I believe it's 7 listening sessions with community members to follow up on past lessons that we've learned from the community. Learning that folks in East Portland don't feel safe in their parks, knowing that cost to take a swimming lesson or to come into a community center has been a barrier to communities with who lack financial resources. So we met with the Vietnamese community, Asian community, the Latinx community, Black Parent Initiative, Bow and Arrow Culture Club, and built on those conversations and listened and heard, what those communities need from us, both in a COVID environment and hopefully when we're on the other side of this, so that this system is serving everyone. And those are going to be long, ongoing conversations. So we are making a shift. This board is going to have a role in supporting that. I look forward to that. We have a community engagement.
This is Juan. Sorry to interrupt.
What's up?
Yeah. You said the board will have a role. I would love to hear. And really, this is fascinating stuff. How can we help you?
Well, I think that the board, our employees, everyone is a part of this community, right? And so we all need to engage into how we can make this system equitable and how this organization can be an anti-racist organization. And so, you have leadership who is here every month, listening to the board. We will find other opportunities where folks can come in and be a part of those engagement processes. I think it's, for us, all the help we can get, to make sure that we're bringing in folks who haven't felt welcome in the system before, who haven't felt like they've had access before, is appreciated. And Juan, love your enthusiasm. I really appreciated being a part of the conversation with the community development group the other day. We need to build authentic relationships. Some of those relationships are going to be built from the ground up, and there may be folks within this virtual room that can help us establish those. I was also going to say that we are hiring a community engagement manager right now who's going to help lead this effort going forward. And so I'm really excited about that process. I know that the board has, or the community engagement group has offered, maybe have someone sit on that interview panel. And so we can have further discussions about that. But, we're all a part of, the responsibility of this system. And so I think we all have a role in opening the gates and helping people feel and understand that this is all of our park system and that we need to make sure that it's serving the folks who have not had access in the past.
I have a question, Tim. A follow-up question is, I'm wondering, is there a larger framework that's being implemented to ensure that this kind of work is institutionalized instead of just being based on the ideas of leadership at the time or staff, participation at the time? But is there any kind of larger framework under which this work is happening?
Funny you should ask, Erin. We actually touched on it at the last meeting, and when I described that Parks is creating a planning network, a planning framework, and it's largely includes this type of work. So it's still being pulled together in terms of a one-pager, a timeline. We have a Gantt chart, So I'm hopeful that we'll find some time at the next board meeting to introduce it. Alternatively, we could introduce it at one of the subgroups if the timing's right. Nicola, do you recall when the timing was for Parks Board?
Yeah, and we're aiming for the next board meeting if at all possible. It a little bit depends on when we get to roll out with staff as well, but that's what we're aiming for.
Great. So this is, I think I spoke about it at a previous board meeting. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds because you only have a few more minutes left of the meeting, but Paul and Bonnie got sort of a preview a couple of weeks ago, and we're working out some of the details and the timing, but in essence, we're looking at a rolling planning framework that is going to include community and stakeholder engagement, and just asking the most important questions like, how are we doing the work? What else do we need to know to do our work? How do we become, an anti-racist organization? And how do we continue to provide equitable services to the community? So it's just like this ongoing question. So instead of it being like a 3-year necessarily strategic plan or a 5-year strategic plan where we really cannot project, right, what our world is going to look like, clearly, this is going to be an ongoing, continuous process. I'm really excited about letting you all know about it a little bit more in depth at the next meeting.
That sounds great. Really looking.
I think Paul froze.
Yeah, he froze.
But he's, you know, he's lucky. He didn't usually when I freeze, I've got one eye going this way and my mouth's
Like
wide
this.
open.
Ah!
Bonnie, you want to take the reins?
Pardon?
There he is. You're back.
Paul, you were frozen for a minute, so.
Okay. So what I was saying was this is a perfect segue to our last topic, which is setting up items for our next agenda. So any other thoughts in terms, this is a perfect item for next time, but are there others that people are interested in having on the agenda for our December meeting? Well, you know, you can always email me or Bonnie with ideas that occur to you. We meet with Adina and Brooke usually mid-month to start drafting the agenda for the following month. So that will be like 2 weeks from this week, Thanksgiving week, essentially. So if you have ideas, get those to us in the next couple of weeks, and we can then consider that for the next agenda. I don't have anything else for today. We'll get out a little bit early, which is nice to do every now and then. Any other parting comments before we close? All right. Thank you all. We'll see you in December.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.